It's my great pleasure to welcome you to St. Joseph's here today. I don't know how many of you it's your first time here. I won't call for a show of hands or whatever, but I guess even for some people who have been here in the past, coming into this lovely new open area must be a bit of an eye-opener and not quite perhaps what you'd anticipated in coming to the local hospice, because I guess what we've been talking about today and we'll be talking about is really attitudes to death and dying and what's a taboo and what isn't. And hopefully what we've been trying to do through the Death Cafe and this conversation this evening is to make it as natural and as normal and as comfortable as possible to talk about these important parts of our lives and our loved ones' lives. So I hope that in the course of the evening that people will have a chance to be positive and sort of life-enhancing about it all as we work through. We also have Joe from National Council for Palliative Care, Director of Communications. And most importantly, I need to introduce Fee Glover, who many of you will know from the BBC, local resident, and here to sort of run this part of the evening and encourage a conversation and a debate, which, as I say, I hope will be much about celebration and life and not about gloom. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being part of this. And thanks to the panel for sharing your work and your thoughts, and to Fee for sharing your time and your skills, particularly, to be with us here tonight. So thank you all. I will now hand it over and slink off stage left.
Thank you. So far be it from me to immediately say that the Chief Executive of a hospice is wrong, but he's wrong. I'm the least important person here tonight. These are the most important people here tonight. And my job is simply to just facilitate this evening and hopefully to get you to ask as many questions as you want to ask. Please don't leave this session with something burning deep inside you, so you're walking down the road going, damn, I just didn't have the nerve or whatever to ask this, because if we want to talk about dying wishes, then we have all of the right people here this evening in order to do that. So we will do a little bit of chat at the beginning, and as soon as you feel that you want to ask questions, just put your hands up. Don't wait for a great big kind of session thing at the end. So Michael has already basically introduced our panel here this evening, and what I'd like to do to really get things going is ask the most important question of all for this evening, which is, what are your dying wishes, and do you find it easy to tell people about them? So Joe, I'm going to start with you, please.
Okay. Hi there. I guess I find it a lot easier now than when I started this job 4 years ago, and I think I probably had much more in common with, I guess, the average Joe then, which is a real discomfort talk about dying and death and bereavement. So I think actually working in this area and seeing that the hardest thing is to have that, to decide to have that conversation. Once you have the conversation, it feels a bit easier. In terms of my dying wishes, I think a lot depends when the dying happens. Hopefully, many years to come. I mean, I'm a Leyton Orient fan, and I guess my dying wish would be to see them win the Premier League. So I think I'm probably going to have to live forever.
Yeah. Keep it real.
For that to happen. But I think for me, ensuring that I've got 2 young children, ensuring that they're looked after whatever age they are, and my ideal would be a dying wish to be able to, I guess, see them grow up and be happy.
Yes. On a very practical note, though, have you had those conversations around exactly where you would like to be buried, or if you'd like to be cremated, or exactly what it is that you'd want to leave to your children? The real nitty-gritty stuff of it.
I've written a will, talked to my partner in very general terms about funeral plans, but I've said, actually, for me, that's not one of my main priorities. I guess I'm more concerned about what happens while I'm alive and what happens to the people who are close to me. I'm relatively relaxed about my funeral burial wishes.
I guess my personal wish, and from having done the project, I think it really comes down to it, is not to die alone and to feel the emotional support around me. And there's so many reasons you can die, but if it is for an illness or if it is for something like that, I really hope that I will have the support around me and people who I will be able to speak to and express my feelings and share my fear or just and enjoy life with them as long as I can, because that is really, from the different people that I've spoken to, that is really what moved me the most, is how valuable was that emotional support that they had, how valuable was the family around them, and how easier the journey was when that was happening. So yeah, I guess that, to me, that is really, really essential.
Very interesting, yes, yeah. So Jade and Lucy, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening as well.
Yeah.
Lucy, if I might start with you, what's your situation at the moment, and have you enjoyed being part
Yes,
of this
very
project?
good. I've got a lot to thank this hospital and everyone in it for helping me to open up more. And this group today really helped me. I've been bottling it up all the time, especially since I lost my husband. And yeah, it's really been helpful. I'm very grateful for it today.
So what kind of things have you now found that you can say and have said?
Well, I've been brought up and I fear death. I know it sounds, but since I've been in this group and heard everyone's, it's given me a bit more, how can I say, I'm not so afraid as much as I was before. I think, well, I should live day to day as it comes. And if it happens, it happens, you know. But as Eleanor said, I'd hate to be on my own. But I doubt if I will be, because I've got two lovely sons. And they're very good, although they're really, really taking it back, because it's only about 7 months since I lost my husband.
Yes.
And but they've been very, very helpful. And as you said, I haven't made arrangements about funerals. I just wanted to, I left it to them. I said, you do with me whatever you tell me you want to do.
And are they okay with that, do you think? Because perhaps this is something that we'll come on to talk about. It's helping those around you deal with a death, isn't it? And with your death, it is not just about ourselves losing the fear or whatever.
They, at the moment, they're sort of, how can I say, they won't open up. They're really taking it hard. And my older boy is the one that done that. I couldn't have done it without him. He done everything, you know. And he's asked me, like, you know, Mum, when you go, how would you like to be cremated or buried? And I said, I'll leave that to you. I don't want to know. I'm always fine being cremated because I'm still alive when I'm being burned.
Okay, has
So
that ever
I left-
happened?
So I left that to him. I said, you do
Yeah.
what you like. I said, you put me in the garden if you like.
But at least you have a dialogue, don't you, with them? I mean, were you ever able to talk to your parents about
No.
what
No,
they
my
would
mum
want?
would never, she wouldn't even be insured because she didn't want to talk about death. And she died in my arms. And I had to do all the necessary things. I was left with her till Monday before the undertakers come and took her away. And I was brave then. If anyone would have told me I'd have done that, I would have said never. But 3 months after, I had a nervous breakdown.
Oh, gosh, everything has its price, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm okay. I mean, I remember her because she was wonderful, Mum. She helped us a lot when we got married. But this group has really opened a new... I'm not very good at putting words in.
You are, actually, you are
And
putting into
it's
words.
opened up a new phase for me to sort of feel that
It's helping you. making
it's
it
helping
easier,
me
yeah.
to realise my grief, and you know, and I'm not the only one. There's so many stories we heard, you know, I wasn't the only one who was afraid of death either, and that was nice to hear that.
Yeah.
Because most of them said, you know, we got to die, but there was one lady said she was afraid to die, and I felt, and she was Catholic as well.
Yeah. It's somehow so comforting, isn't it, when
It
somebody
is,
else
that's the
puts
word,
into
that
words
was the word. I couldn't
what you're
find the word.
thinking. Yeah.
It was very comfortable, and I hope they do it again.
Yeah.
I really hope they do it again. I'd love to come again.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot to thank her, to thank Eleanor, because she was very good to me. I was here in respite. As soon as my husband died, they brought me in for respite. And she was the first friend I had, and she took my photos, and she come home in the garden. And yeah, that was really, really lovely as well.
Yeah, it's a lovely exhibition, isn't it?
It was
It's
a
lovely
very
project.
lovely experience, yeah, which I've not had before.
Yeah. Do you know what? I want to applaud you. Shall we just...
Yeah.
So what are your experiences? Would you echo a lot of what we're talking about?
Yes, I feel death. First of all, we have to come to terms with we will die one day. So I like the pre-planning things that we've done and things, yeah.
Yeah, it is the inevitable consequence of a life, isn't it, death?
Yeah.
Have you changed in your ability to talk about death, though, through the work that is being done here?
Yeah, well, my mum came here and saw my, what's it called? Huh?
Panel of your exhibition.
Yeah, and she read it and said, wow, Jane, you have achieved a lot in your life, and that's all I want to achieve things.
The other people who took part in your project, have you been affected very much by everybody's stories? I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it?
It is and it isn't, because I think it's also about celebration of life, you know. So yes, it's about death ultimately, but it's about identifying these objects that are important to our lives. And I mean, it was one of the questions I had at the beginning was, okay, we are in a consumerist society, it's all about objects that we own, you know, what are these objects that are so important in our lives? And I realized that actually, you know, it wasn't the object, it was the emotional attachment to those objects, it was the people attached to those objects, and it was the stories and the individual stories, and you know that better than anyone else, Fee. I mean,
Yes, there are no speedboats or fast cars in
yeah,
there.
yeah, but and those stories and how moving an individual story can be is completely grasping, and so yes, it was a tough project, but it wasn't, because I was just so moved by the honesty and how much people just open up and share their stories and trusted me to, you know, and yeah, it just was very human and honest, and then, you know, and then you feel that you're doing a good job because you're moved, but then it means that the honesty filters through, and you need to digest that, of course, and there were days where it was harder than others, and, you know, doing the editing afterwards and being at home and listening to all those stories and putting them down, you know, sometimes was obviously really moving, but it just felt right. Yeah.
Joe, should we talk a bit about the hurdles that you face in getting people to talk more about death? Is it something that's very British? Are we particularly bad at it here?
I wouldn't claim to be an expert on attitudes around the world, but I think we are quite bad about talking about death in Britain. I mean, and research that we've done shows that actually, if you ask people, are you comfortable talking about dying? Most people say yes. If you then ask them nitty-gritty questions, have you talked to your partner, if you've got a partner, about their end-of-life wishes? Well, actually, half of people say they haven't at all. If you ask people if they've written a will, only a third of people have. If you ask people if they've considered registering as an organ donor, not many people have. So I think there is a British stiff upper lip. One of the things we do at Dying Matters, and I know various other organisations do it, we do an event to coincide with the Mexican Day of the Dead that starts in November. So, I mean, I've never been to Mexico, but my understanding in Mexico and many Latin American countries, there's a national day which is all about remembrance. It's about remembering people who have died, remembering their lives, grieving, very much celebratory. And we hold an event to coincide with that and to reflect on British traditions. And I think we are quite uptight or subdued, or our tradition of remembrance is quite different and far more reserved than certainly in many parts of the world.
What are the hurdles that you think we face in terms of, bad practice, the really, and you can criticise anybody you like, the things that you could really write down on a piece of paper and say, stop doing that,
Yep.
start doing this?
I think there's a couple of main things. I think many health and care professionals still aren't very comfortable talking about dying. I think we come across many doctors or consultants, for example, not palliative care ones, but other consultants, who say, do you know what, I do find it really difficult to talk about dying. I view it as a failure if I can't do anything to cure somebody or to treat them. So I think if I, or as an organisation, had a wish list, it would be all health and care professionals, not just those who work in palliative care, to become much more comfortable and confident and talk about dying, and to have the training to have those sensitive conversations. I think that's one part of the equation. I think another key part is all of us actually as members of the public, and we need support. It is a difficult issue. I would still find it difficult, less difficult than I used to, but still find it difficult having a very serious conversation, maybe with a parent or a sibling about their wishes or my wishes. But I think all of us actually would probably need to just be a little bit bolder, a little bit braver, and maybe a little bit more responsible, particularly when it comes to thinking about writing a will, or if you've got a family who depend on you, life insurance, at least thinking about these issues. And I think lots of us do bury our head in the sand. And it's understandable, we'd rather live for the day and try and sort of ignore the future. But I think that twin track, the public feeling more confident, and health and care professionals who I think hold the key to so much, not only in terms of sort of ensuring that fantastic clinical care is everywhere, but that they become more comfortable talking about dying and better able to support people who are dying and their families.
Is there anybody in the audience who would fall into that category of that healthcare professional? Not the kind of healthcare professional who's not being very helpful at the moment, but just anyone who'd like to contribute to that, because I think it's a really interesting point that death is viewed as a failure, because if you're under the care of a consultant and the outcome is that you don't survive, then perhaps that kind of feeling that is passed on to the relatives, that it's just all gone terribly wrong, whereas of course the death may have happened anyway. Has anyone found themselves in that situation, or is anyone happy to talk from a healthcare perspective? Or do we have any healthcare professionals? Yes. I feel now I'm picking on you, madam. Does that ring true, what Joe's saying?
Yes, I think our experience was that despite we have the good support in general from the hospital and the hospice, we have a meeting with the GP and all the different parts and all the different parties involved in the end-of-life care for my daughter. And the GP commit himself that we will have the oxygen that she will require at home, because we were provided with the wrong one. And she said to him, this is not the right one, I don't feel well, I need this other kind of oxygen. And he said, yes, okay, we will do it, blah, blah, blah. And it were about over 12 hours. We have to go and chase him in the GP surgery, and he was like blaming the hospital because the hospital have to order, and then the hospital call us and say, no, you have to go to the GP, and I think it's really dreadful when you are in that situation.
I think a major change occurred in the 1970s with Dame Cicely Saunders and her work, because my understanding is that before then patients were sort of left in corridors because nothing could be done for them. Doctors were not interested because they couldn't save lives. And what Dame Cicely did was to draw attention to dying people and to give them dignity, to put them up front. And in doing so, she made a major breakthrough in healthcare.
Yeah, yeah. How better could the media help? You've mentioned the Mexican Day of the Dead and the fact that you've tried to focus on that, but we had a very brief conversation before this panel. We were talking about the terrible kind of you need a hook in order to get a story. It's just a fact for journalists, and perhaps there might be a value in starting something like that in this country, saying, there is a day, all journalists love a day, there's a day, where we start talking about these things, we're all going to talk about it, we're all going to come together. Could that happen, do you think?
I think it could. I mean, it's one of the reasons we have an annual awareness week, Die Matters Awareness Week, that I know St. Joseph's and many other organisations are involved in. We have considered as an organisation putting out that, suggestion that there should be a bank holiday or a national day where you can take the time to remember those people who've died. It was interesting, the conversation we had, and it's certainly something we'll think about. In terms of the media more generally, I think it's really mixed. I find that lots of journalists are very interested in end-of-life issues, in caring, dying, in bereavement. Many people have been personally affected by it. I think the problem is it's a complex issue. I remember talking to a journalist, actually a friend who, for my sins or her sins, did lots of work for the Daily Mail. And she was very nice person, very sympathetic, very supportive. She wanted to work.
You always have to say that.
I do.
Actually, a terribly nice person.
Yeah, she wanted to. I was suggesting a story to her. She really liked it. I'd suggested a couple of people who could be featured in the story, who had life-limiting conditions, and she said, "Do you know what? I'd love to run this, but I can tell you now, they're not going to get past the picture desk of this newspaper because of their one person's age and one person was in a wheelchair." And so I think there are parts of the media that are so crass and have actually a very contradictory line where they might run a very sympathetic story if it meets their criteria on the same day as running a very contradictory news story. Then again, there are other parts of the media that I think are fantastic. So I was mentioning to you, we were really impressed with BBC Radio 5. It was last year, ran on the Richard Bacon show, which no longer exists, ran a great piece interviewing a guy called Steve Evans, who was terminally ill, very charismatic guy. They broadcast from his house on several occasions, from his garden, ran really long pieces. And it was fantastic broadcasting, really in-depth, getting to hear people's own stories, not just about the fact he was dying, but about his life, about his memories. And I thought that was brilliant. So I think there's some fantastic reporting and broadcasting, and some journalists who probably either personally struggle with issues or the editorial demands make it very difficult to get the actual stories across.
Yeah. Did anyone else hear the Richard Bacon programme while he was concentrating? It was really extraordinary, and actually, in my experience of 25 years of radio, I've never heard death talked about in such an honest way, and also someone so close to the end, having conversations, on air, and still willing to, share very precious last days, talking to 2 million strangers. It was really, really remarkable. And I think actually the way that journalists talk to people who are approaching the end of life is really important. I don't think it's a very easy thing to do either. And you say, perhaps there's not enough training in amongst the healthcare professionals. I think there's not enough training in the media either. And maybe that, is something that should be addressed? Because you might think that, you know, every good interviewer has that capacity, but I'm not sure, actually. I think people probably fight shy of asking questions just because they don't want to appear rude, and actually they're the questions that should be asked. Any questions from all of you, lovely people sitting here? I think we've got a couple of minutes left. Can I randomly pick on people and ask them if they've talked to their loved ones about their dying wishes, or would you all just start packing up your things and running for the door? Yes, lovely lady at the back. Yep.
And I was wondering whether or not you might have thought of a way of facilitating this transparency of conversation better, maybe in the future, between healthcare professionals and patients, and maybe where that might happen or how that might happen.
Yeah.
So how does it happen at the moment?
What do you run workshops? What do you do?
As an organisation, we have run workshops in partnership with charities such as Macmillan Cancer Support for GPs, just sort of half-day sessions to improve their communication skills about talking about these sensitive issues and talking them through the ways they might want to start those conversations, how to take their cue from the person they're seeing and the sort of issues to cover. And we evaluate it and we ask GPs to feedback, not only immediately after the training session, but a couple of months down the line to see if it's changed their practice. And they've been very successful, so sort of short, sharp interventions definitely can help. And I think it's a cultural shift, and when we've surveyed GPs, sorry to keep going on about GPs, because it's not just GPs who this applies to, but actually I think they're encouraging signs. When we've asked GPs, have you ever initiated a conversation with one of your patients about end-of-life wishes, younger GPs are much more likely to have done so than older GPs, which I find interesting, counterintuitive actually in lots of ways, but very encouraging for the future.
Is there anyone here from St. Joseph's who wants to add anything to that, just about people who want to find out how to talk, you know, better about this subject? I mean, could you just turn up here and ask for a little bit of advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously a very different kind of approach to whether or not it's dealing with a professional audience or you and me on the street who want to learn how to, or want to know how to approach it. I know a lot of you went to the Deaf Cafe for this session, and we're looking to run a lot more of those because we realise that there is such a need for that, for a place, kind of a safe, secure place for people to come to and start to have those conversations and start to open up with actually strangers maybe before they then start to talk to their family and friends about this subject, which is obviously so tough for people to talk about. It is hard to engage with GPs. You know, I've really tried to kind of get GPs in, especially to this kind of event, but you know, at the same time they've got so much pressures on them, there's so much going on out there, so we just need to try and find a way to facilitate those conversations more, and that's something that we are going to strive to do more so of this year, to encourage awareness and also encourage for them so they understand how they can refer people to St. Joseph's, so they're not afraid of doing that as well, and being able to have those conversations with patients to begin with. So yeah, absolutely, people can get in touch with us and we can signpost them in the right direction. We have an information support team that sit right at reception desk, right there, so the first thing when you come in through the door, you speak to them and they can tell you who you want to go and speak to, where you can find more information. It's a free service for everyone to tap into.
Just to mention one thing that I felt from the project is also about having time, and I think one of the difficulty for GP is that when they meet with patients, they don't have the time, because to get info, to understand the patient, to get to understand where he comes from, where you need to be able to listen, and you need to have that time, and depending on the patient, it goes faster than the other, but there's no one patient I spend less than 2 hours, 3 hours with, to be able to really get into the understanding of where they were at with coping with their own death and the future, and where they were with their own lives. And I don't see how GPs could actually do that on a 10-minute time.
6 minutes now. Is it 6 minutes? Heavens to Betsy. Yeah. You'd be hard pushed on 6 minutes. Can I just take the gentleman behind?
I'd just like to reiterate the point Joe made earlier about having the conversations with people about your dying wishes. I mean, my mum, she died just before Christmas, and it sounds strange, but she had a really good death because we'd had the conversations when she was alive, and so when the time came, we knew exactly what to do. There's no ambiguity. I'm also a funeral director, and asked on a daily basis the damage, the pain, the confusion that's caused by families that don't have those conversations with the person when they're alive. Because you always think you've got time to have these conversations, but at some point, especially as we get older, you're going to lose capacity. And so people think you've got plenty of time to have these conversations and put them off, and then there's a point where that person can't make those decisions anymore. So just to reiterate the importance of actually having a conversation with your family whilst you're alive, and so because families, especially when they kind of spread out, they may not agree on certain matters, they may not have even seen each other in years, but they'll all come together for the funeral and they want to do the best for their loved one. But if you haven't had a conversation with the loved one, people might have a very different opinion of what's best.
Yeah, but you must see some terrible tortured souls and sibling rivalries and all kinds of things. Gentlemen at the front.
I wanted to say I think there's scope for making November a month for remembrance, because we already have Remembrance Sunday for the World Wars. The Sunday afterwards, Road Peace always have their services for people killed on the roads. And also last November I went to St. Martin's in the Fields, where they now have an annual service for the homeless, and we were told that over the previous 12 months 153 people had died on London streets through being homeless. So the picture that comes across to me is November is when we remember the dead, no matter how they died.
Yes, yeah. I think to focus the mind, it is a really good idea. Can I put in one tiny little plug as well? I do something on Radio 4 called the Listening Project, which is a really fantastic project. It's so simple. It's two people. You can sit down with someone you love or care about and have a conversation that really matters to both of you. You can talk about absolutely anything that you want. We record 40-minute conversations. We give you a CD of the conversation. I turn it into a little program on Radio 4, and the whole conversation goes on to be stored at the British Library. And lots and lots of people have used it to have end-of-life conversations and to have that chat, so that you never look back and go, oh God, if only I'd asked Dad this, or if only I'd talked to my sister about that. And people come out of the conversations, I think, feeling, incredibly secure that they've done something and we've enabled them, because we come along with our lovely shiny microphones and we do all the editing and we make it sound really beautiful for you. And I can't recommend it highly enough, actually. And also, there is something really lovely about your life story going into the British Library forever, and you become part of this huge kind of picture of our society. So if any of you are interested in doing that with someone you love, all you have to do is send me an email, listeningproject@bbc.co.uk, and I can set the ball rolling. But we want as many conversations as possible, and we want as many celebrations of life as possible, and lots of really fantastic memories back
Can
in
I
what
add
we
something?
do.
Can
Yes,
you
of course
add
you
to
can.
that?
Yes.
That GPs can have a bit more compassion when they tell the person they're dying. Instead of just holding it like they've done with my husband, you're dying, you've got cancer, the lungs. And my husband he just sat there, and I was in shock. Well, if they can have a bit more compassion, talk to him, sorry, But he didn't have no compassion at all, and that's what hurt.
Yes,
So
I
if
bet
you
it is, yeah.
bring that into it, that what surgeons or whatever, they can have no compassion when they tell a person they're dying and they haven't got long to live. They told him he's got a week to live, he lived 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That would be nice for GPs to sort of be more compassionate.
Yeah, that must be something that you've come across a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just because you're good at being a doctor doesn't mean you're good at talking, does it? I mean, very often not good at writing. That's a cliche, isn't it? That you can't read a doctor's handwriting. But I don't think we can assume that just because somebody is expert at the surgical or clinical side, that they're automatically going to be expert at the human or personal side.
Yeah, but also that's such a shocking thing.
To make them aware more, to be more compassionate.
Yeah.
you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of our time limit. So if any of you do have other burning questions, then I'm sure nobody on the panel would mind if you just came up to us individually afterwards. But thank you very much indeed for staying for this session, and a huge, massive round of applause to our lovely panelists. Thank you very much.